I'm Cynthia Rogerson. I write novels and short stories. I'm from California and live in the Highlands. And I've been there for a long, long time, probably almost 35 years.
And Cynthia's here today to talk principally about her wonderful new novel, Wait For Me, Jack, where she writes under the name Addison Jones, which is actually part of your own name, so it doesn't feel like a pseudonym at all, does
That's
it?
right. Yeah.
Which has had terrific reviews. And we had a lovely event here in Dundee where you read from it and spoke about it. And Cynthia, I wondered if we might start with the comment that the novelist Tim Pears said about this novel. He said, this is a proper love story. And that's because you're doing something quite interesting with the love story, aren't you?
Well, I suppose I've never been that interested in what leads up to a marriage proposal or courtship. I think falling in love is quite, I won't say it's painless, but it's easy. It's what happens after that when people start living together that interests me. And I wanted to write a story about two people with a very imperfect relationship, but which really was a love story that is not about pretty sunsets or holding hands or always making up after every row right away. A long relationship full of loose ends and raggedness and lots of attempts and lots of failures, and now and again a really shiny moment. Two people who don't let go of each other despite everything. That's what interests me.
And you do this by creating a story that is unspeakably fresh and new because you are writing in reverse. We begin with Jack and Millie as very, very old people together, bumbling around in their domestic world, and then the story unspools and you go back to the beginning, so the book finishes with their first meeting.
Yeah. I decided to write it in this kind of rewind fashion because I didn't want it to be a story about what will happen, will they stay together or not. I wanted it to be a story of why they stayed together and what led to each event. I also visualized their marriage as kind of a big mound of years, and I wanted to just kind of excavate it, just keep scraping away till I got at the source of their discontent, their happinesses, their children, their stories. And I wanted it to be in a random way, so many chapters aren't about dramatic events. And I have the date and the time on it to emphasize I just sort of randomly took a slice of a day out, just like an archaeologist might from a big excavation, to say, let's see what Jack and Millie are doing Saturday, 10:30 a.m. in 1943, for instance, or actually 53 it would be. They weren't together in 43. And I thought if I examined it minutely enough and with enough realism, it would tell the reader much about their whole life just by looking at what they did in one ordinary day.
That's a fabulous insight as to your creative approach and practice, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about that later. For now, can we return to that theme of taking a whole life and starting the novel at its end? When I read it, Cynthia, I felt that fizz of excitement that's all about, oh my goodness, this is a new kind of story where a writer is daring to take on the frailties of old age and mortality and those kinds of split seconds before death. Then, lo, in the way of these things, I felt like you were the crest of a wave, because we were just talking earlier, I've just finished Mike McCormack's Solar Bones, which is a similar kind of premise, a whole life unrolling.
Is it?
In the space of those few moments before death. I'm also thinking of Robert McFarlane's, Robert McCrum, I do beg your pardon, his terrific new memoir, Every Third Thought, which is a contemplation of mortality and the way we might weigh up our lives. So it seems that you were doing something really exciting. All your books have a kind of domestic, I would say, edge to them, that you take these kind of quite quiet lives and, to use your own word, excavate. Would you regard yourself as a writer who's interested principally in the domestic world?
Domestic's a funny word because we all live in houses. We all have, even people who are living alone and don't have many relationships have domestic lives. So I'm interested in people rather than, I guess it's more character-led than plot-led. I am interested in what connects people and what doesn't connect people. It's called domestic, probably because they're not genre books. And I'm primarily interested in the man-woman relationship, also parent and child and friendship, of course. But I think it's fascinating, and my obsession with it will never end, I suppose. There's such a huge variety of kinds of relationships, and all of them teach us little things about ourselves and the way we relate to other people, I think.
Yeah.
I find.
And your books have that lovely kind of combination of the sweetness of life, celebrating those small moments that occur, as you say, inside houses, inside rooms, between two people, those quiet moments. And then there's always, as we have the hint of, I suppose, in titles, I Love You Goodbye, the name of another novel, Letters from My Deathbed, another. So there's this kind of awareness of mortality all the way there at the edge, just making us know that that sweetness and that smile comes with sadness.
Yes. Well, not necessarily even sadness all the time, because it's, I think, the brevity of life and awareness of mortality informs everything we do, and not in a morbid or sad way all the time. But there is something especially poignant, I guess, about everything we do and say. That's why I'm more interested in the undramatic times and in the periods leading up to, the periods leading after dramatic events. So in the book Wait For Me, Jack, I don't have any chapters where people die or get married or are born. I have the moments leading up to them in the years and moments leading following them. I think anticipation and memory are where my characters, anyway, it's where their lives are lived more intensely than in the actual moment.
Gosh, that's beautifully put. And I think that's why your novels are so exciting, is that you take that risk of, in a way, not investigating the area that so many novels do, because so many novels are predicated upon those moments of drama.
And they are exciting, and I enjoy reading them in other people's novels, but I've found in real life that isn't the case, that when things are happening, when important life-changing events are happening, there's a kind of almost detachment or numbness that I experience, and maybe lots of people experience. And it's remembering it, or reliving it, or being afraid of it, or looking forward to it, leading up to it, where the emotion is most intense.
Okay, that's fascinating. Can I ask you, does that translate, that kind of attitude, into a sort of practice? In other words, when you're imagining, say, the point of Jack and Millie having their first child, do you imagine that in detail in your mind and then deliberately write around those events, or is it something that comes quite naturally?
I think I had in mind that they had certain tragedies in their lives, and I wasn't going to write about them directly. So when I talked about their ordinary events, their meals in restaurants or their car trips and things, it was with the knowledge of something that they've survived. So of course it informed how they thought and reacted to things.
Yeah.
But I didn't purposely set out to do that. I think it did just happen naturally.
Okay.
Yeah.
You talked earlier about this kind of excavation process, and I think that's really fascinating that you just lit upon a certain day, even a time of day.
Yeah.
The book is that precise, isn't it?
It was that fun, and the publisher said, "Why do you have these? Do we need these?" And I thought, well, yeah, because I want to remind the reader that this is a specific point, that this is an entry hole into their lives. Now we're getting into their lives at this moment, and like a photograph, like a frozen frame, and then, bing, then the camera's rolling again, and we can watch what's happening with them. Yeah.
That's lovely. Cynthia, you're a very well-established writer of short stories and novels, and of course you've won the V.S. Pritchard Award, and your novels have been serialized on radio. You also publish short stories. Do you feel with every new project there's a sense of taking some great risk with what you do? You've just suggested by this kind of almost filmic process that you just described there, that seems to be different to the other work. In addition, you're launching yourself as Addison Jones instead of Cynthia Rogerson. Can you talk a bit about the similarities and differences between this novel and past work?
Well, I do try a different form with each novel, slightly different form, and although my themes continue to be relationships, I don't want to keep repeating myself. Yeah, each novel has been different. In I Love You, Goodbye, it was 4 first-person narratives. I just wanted the reader to hear the thoughts and voices of these 4 people who are not me, obviously. And in my next book, I'm setting myself a challenge that isn't original at all, but I want to have a story that takes place in a day, a novel. I've already got a title, Day of Departure.
There you go again.
Day
That's a
Departure.
classic Cynthia Rogerson title.
Do you like it? I just thought it's going to be a day of all sorts of leavings, and I'm just going to minutely examine a day. Gosh, you could have a whole lifetime in a day. If you look at any day, and nothing's ever born in any day. So I'm just going to look at the day, and it's going to have 2 main characters, probably 1 first person and 1 third person. I've never tried this, and it'll have a character. I thought I would like to draw on my own experience in this respect. I've always been saying goodbye, hello, goodbye, because I have 2 homes in California and in Scotland.
Yeah.
And it's the day that you leave either place. The day you're going is a whole different show. It's also intense. But the day I leave California to come here is a very dense day. Very low, very layered. To wake up in one country and go to bed in another, and there's all sorts of, and everything you do is heightened, but the other half of the story will be someone who's departing from this life and knows it because the time has come and all the signs are there. It's the last day of their life, and it's I think the internal monologue section will be that person, and the other. There might be other strands. I literally only have notes for this now, but I am quite excited. Everything is kind of feeding into it, so I'm making notes all the time.
Oh, this is really interesting, and especially for our students. So this is your writing process then, to imagine and start a kind of note-taking process. How long does that go on for?
Until I get a big chunk of free time to sit down and write a first draft.
Right.
So I'm making little notes to myself, and I might not use any of them, but it's making me remember that I'm doing this.
Can I have some specifics, please, Cynthia?
Of
Do you have a
notes?
special magic notebook or a magic pen?
I have a folder on my desktop, on my laptop, that says Day of Departure, and it just has little quotes that I pick up in books or poems that I might want to use in it, or ideas, or things that over here. Almost every day there's something I add to it. I guess it's a bit like a rag bag if you're a person who's crafty, and I am not. But you might want to pick things up you might want to use later. You think, oh, that scrap of sculpt might do for this, then I make it later. So only it's words instead of actual things. And then
And how long does that process tend to go on before you find that magic bit of time where you can sit down and write the first draft?
Well, typically 6 months maybe.
Okay.
Because I'm usually busy doing something else, at least 6 months. And it doesn't always result in a novel. I've had folders that sit there that have been on my desktop for years with all the makings for the beginning of a novel, which I've never begun. But this is the one that is currently interesting me.
How lovely.
Cool.
I've just read
That'd be
a
fun.
terrific quote by Kafka. A writer who is not writing is a monster waiting to be unleashed upon the world. I think I'm kind of paraphrasing that a little bit. How are you when you're only getting to add to that folder and not getting to sit down at your desk and write the novel?
Do you know?
Are you a monster of insanity?
I do feel I'm much better to live with and much happier when I am writing, in the process of writing. And that's why novels are quite good for me to write, because they last a long time. I can get cranky in the middle of writing a novel, though, because now and then it goes flat, and then I lose faith in myself, and I think, oh, this isn't real. No one's going to believe this character or this story.
Yeah.
But mostly, that's actually a better time than the publishing bit or the whatever. Everything that comes afterward, I might. So far in my life, it's not been as good as the times that it was really going well when I was writing, when I thought I'd nailed something I'd been trying to nail for a long time. Then I just sit by myself at my desk and cackle. I think I'm a genius.
I love that. I love that image of you sitting at your desk cackling. Do you have, once you start that process, a very kind of hard and fast routine? That you'll be there at the computer at 9 o'clock and you won't get up till 12 or whatever?
I totally recommend that discipline to people. I think it's good, but my life has too many other commitments. So what I do is I just wing it, and every day whenever I have a spare space of time on a train or sometimes when my husband's watching television, I'm on the laptop right next to him because I don't want to, be too isolated. I can't say that commercially popular stuff is always crass or shallow, because some of it's absolutely fantastic.
No, exactly.
So how the public does like it, and when it does slip through the net and gets out there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that Mike McCormack novel I was just talking about, The Solar Bones, it's described as the novel in one sentence. Like, that's become its little attachment.
Oh, right.
So, of course, everyone thinks, oh, that sounds tiresome and tiring,
Oh, it's all one sentence?
That's actually,
no punctuation?
No commas.
Oh.
But the thing is, it's actually, that's the last thing that you notice about it.
Yeah.
And in the same way, your books, as being women's fiction, is the last thing you notice about it.
Yeah. So, and once it gets that label, it's easy to dismiss. Because if I read a review that said that, I would think that's just gimmicky.
Exactly.
Like the Emer McBride, I really wasn't into it at first because I thought this is just. We all know that we think and talk this way, but why write it phonetic? But then, I got past that.
Yeah.
And understood it.
This is the thing, those definitions hold us all up as readers and writers. Right, do you want to start again?
I've been recording that.
Oh, okay.
That's been quite nice. Not all of it, but some of it.
That's actually a really nice idea for a film right there, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a bit like that lovely film, Vanya on 42nd Street, where that's probably the best part of the film. Cynthia, can you also talk about your role at Moniac, and also you've been here. We've loved having you as a Royal Literary Fellow at Dundee. Can you tell us a little bit about that role and part of your life?
Yep. It's impossible to make money from books, at least for writers at my level. So I work as a writer, and I worked at Moniac for 10 years, and mostly as a programmer there, programming director, which was a dream job, absolute dream job. And then I got a fellowship with the Royal Literary Fund and worked at Dundee University for a couple of years. And I still I love it here. It's fantastic, really interesting working with students. And I tutor on courses, and I've been visiting book groups at bookshops.
Well, none of that surprises me, because your approach to writing is direct, full of wonderful common sense, creativity, and a kind of kindness that I think pervades your work.
That's sweet. And
pervades your relationships with young writers starting off in their writing lives.
Well, I have been very much encouraged by writers as I've come along writing too, and it's good to give back a bit. I've been inspired by writers here in Scotland and in America, but mostly here in Scotland, and I've been given a lot of feedback and support by them. And I'm always happy to do that for other writers. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, Kirsty and Gail. This has been fun.
Yeah.